What's up guys, my 21,500 subscribers and 89.3% of you who have not subscribed yet. Today in this video, I would like to compare the XT250 to the CRF300L. I think both of these motorcycles make great beginner bikes as well as just great motorcycles overall. Now I've been riding for over 20 years and I can still jump on either of these motorcycles and have a great experience. So which one is better, or more importantly, which one is better for you personally? Well, in this video, I'll compare them side by side and we'll find out. After all, these are the two flagship models, if you will, of the dual sport scene for Yamaha and Honda. Which one do I think's best? Well, we'll discuss that further in the video, and also I'll go thoroughly in depth about mods to make these bikes more personalized for your personal needs in riding and also well equipped for your terrain. So let's get into the comparison. I feel this is a great comparison because of the value you get out of buying one of these dual sports. Both of these bikes are true dual sports with nice long service intervals, and you can ride these bikes off-road proficiently. Both sport a solid 21-inch front and 18-inch rear spoked wheel package, which is exactly what you want for off-road. On the pricing, the XT250 comes in at $52.99 and the 300L comes in at $53.99 or $56.99 if you want ABS. Also, the 300L comes in a Rally version, which I love, or the low seat version, which we'll discuss more in a later section in this video. Since inevitably somebody will mention in the comments, yes, you do have to pay freight and assembly if you buy one new at the dealer, but the MSRP is a good price to go by because a lot of times this also dictates resale value for used motorcycles as well. It's a good reference point in my opinion. Now, one other thing to note is the XT250 has been around much longer, and you can usually find a used one for a fair price. If you go 2013 or newer, it's going to be the newest model with fuel injection. After I bought mine, I looked on Marketplace and I found 3 more in my area at the $3,000 price point. So very affordable for an entry-level motorcycle. Now, on a quick side note, I do prefer the fuel injection models over the previous models, which were non-fuel injection carburetor, and the main reason why is because the state of fuel today, fuel injection is just better as far as reliability, and you can let it sit and not have to worry about cleaning out a carburetor, gumming up jets, etc. So personally, I think fuel injection is the way to go, and instead of messing with jets, you could do what I did and buy a $250 EJK and just adjust the fuel manually by a couple presses of buttons. You can do this on the fly, you can do it anytime you do an upgrade to exhaust, intake, etc., and it really allows you to adjust the range of fuel from the lower RPMs all the way to high in separate intervals. It's really nice, and it's super easy to install. You just plug in 2 connections. $250 is a little more expensive than jets, of course, but it's well worth it in my opinion to be able to easily change the bike when you go to different altitudes or just slap on a new exhaust and not have to worry about pulling out the carburetor every single time. So as far as comparing these two motorcycles, of course both of these are not stock. The 300L will have a ECU exhaust with advanced timing and 91 octane, whereas the XT250 will have an electronic jet kit, exhaust, and modified intake. But let's talk about stock specs. I know this is kind of a boring part and we should get it out of the way. I feel it's important to talk about specs in the start of the review / comparison, and basically I cut out anything that's kind of useless and I put in the numbers that we're mostly going to care about when comparing these two motorcycles. As I always do, I made a little cheat sheet because talking about the specs is one thing, I also like to see them visually. Post-edit, I didn't want to talk too much about upgrades at this portion of the video, but if that's something you're concerned with or you want more information to upgrade these bikes, to make them amazing or just customized for you, and I will talk about which ones I've done and which ones I really recommend for you to get a more pleasurable experience out of your motorcycle. Hey guys, I just want to take a quick second to thank you guys for clicking on the video, and I really appreciate you taking the time to watch it all the way through. That's really awesome, and I know a lot of you guys do that. This video took a long time for me to film and edit as well. And if you're new to the channel, I do a lot of reviews and a lot of comparisons just like this, and I would really appreciate it if you subscribe, because that's the best way to keep seeing content from my channel. Even some of my best friends were not getting notifications, so if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you'd like to see more content like this, just swing over to the Patreon. I have a ton of free stuff over there, as well as exclusive weekly content that are full feature videos. So check it out if you have time. Links are pinned to the first comment below, and let's go over the specifications of these two motorcycles. Okay, firstly, let's talk about the engine. The CRF300L has a 286cc single, which is liquid cooled, and the Yamaha XT250 is a 249cc single that is air cooled. Now, I've had previously people put comments below and they say, hey, I wish their air-cooled engines would be back, they're slightly lighter, etc, etc. There is big advantages to having liquid-cooled engines. For one, liquid-cooled engines just overall run cooler, and because of that, the tolerances can be so much tighter, which allows higher compression, higher RPMs, and just overall better performance. Generally, liquid-cooled engines will perform a bit better than air-cooled, but I could see the advantage of air-cooled as well. When it comes down to horsepower at the crank, the Honda is pushing 27, whereas the Yamaha is pushing 19. The torque, the Honda is 19.6, where the Yamaha is 14 foot-pounds of torque. The transmission. The Honda features a 6-speed transmission with a close ratio 1:5 and a tall 6, where the Yamaha XT only has a 5-speed transmission. The wet weight, this is full of fuel, oil, etc., is 306 pounds or 139 kilograms on the 300L, and is 291 pounds or 132 kilograms on the Yamaha XT250. Seat height is important because this is one of the big reasons why a lot of people buy the Yamaha XT250. For the Honda, it's 34.7 inches or 881 millimeters. For the Yamaha, it's 31.9 inches, 810 millimeters, making it, as far as dual sports, pretty much the lowest in class as far as seat height. So very good for shorter riders.
Hey, what about me?
TW, yes, we know your seat height is low, but you're being greedy at this point. We've done a full video review of you on the channel. Fine, I'll mention you later in the video, but for now, go away. As far as fuel capacity, the Honda comes stock with a 2.1 gallon tank, or 7.9 liters. Now the XT250 has actually 3 different tank sizes depending on where you're located, but the standard size is 2.6 gallons, 9.8 liters. Estimated miles per gallon is 72 on the Honda and 76 on the Yamaha. And we already talked about the MSRP, $53.99 versus $52.99 on the Yamaha. So that's the specs, we got them out of the way. Stay tuned, we're about to talk about off-road. Off-road. Both of these motorcycles have great linear power bands, but the lower seat height of the Yamaha is a bonus or a curse depending on your height. At 5'10" or 178 centimeters, I felt a bit cramped on the XT250. To make it a little more comfortable, I also installed a higher sweep bars and bar risers, but there's definitely a positive to lower seat height. Anyone new or a shorter rider will find this to be a huge confidence booster, as in it's always easy to keep the bike standing up if you start to lose traction or you want to put a foot to the ground. Now, I've never rode the Honda CRF300LS, which is their new lower seat version, but there's an interesting takeaway when you look at the XT versus the LS. Okay, so the 300L and the XT250 both have 11.2 inches or 29 centimeters of ground clearance, but when you get the LS version of the 300, which is 2-inch lower seat height, it brings it a little more closer to the XT seat height, but you also lose roughly 2 inches of ground clearance. Let's put the numbers on the screen real quick so you can see exactly what I'm talking about and have a point of reference. That measurement lost on the LS's underbelly makes the XT a little bit higher and a little more capable when it comes to clearing obstacles. Just something to consider if you were looking into an LS 300 model. What I do like about the XT is even with the shorter seat, you are still getting the 21-inch front rim and 18-inch rear rim that comes standard on both bikes, but this allows you to go over bigger rocks and other obstacles a bit easier than if you were running something like the XR150L, which has smaller tires and is less capable off-road. For exploring the outdoors and going down nice trails, both of these bikes are a pleasure to ride. I can't really tell you one is better than the other, so if that's your goal, both are pretty good. When it comes to a bit harder off-road, the 300L has 20% more suspension travel, and you definitely feel that when you hit ruts and rocks. Though both bikes have relatively soft suspension for harder riding, and if that's something you do, consider setting money aside for suspension. Look, I rode the 300L for 2 years with the stock suspension, with the preload cranked all the way up. I didn't think I needed it for this particular motorcycle for the purpose of riding that I did with it until I installed the Cogent dynamic suspension, and it was a world of difference. Same situation with the XT. I mean, if you bomb it hard enough in ruts, you just max out the forks and you just feel that really bad negative clack. Riding both stock, I feel the XT has more of a shortcoming when it comes to maxing out your suspension. Next, I want to mention the difference in gearing, particularly in the transmission. The XT250 250 sits relatively wide when it comes to gearing, and if I had to guess, I would say that's probably done to allow the small 19 horsepower engine to achieve highway speeds. In turn, it kind of suffers in rear wheel torque. Not only does the Honda make 50% more torque, which is felt in the rear wheel, it's even more so with the stock gearing. That the Honda does sport the 6-speed transmission, but the 1 to 5 close allows you to adjust for the perfect gearing in your situation. And sometimes I don't even get that right, but the torque of this thing is a tractor, and at a hero course and a dual sport event, I've accidentally climbed a hill from a dead stop in second gear, and the bike had no problems.
Dude, this thing can climb anything in second gear.
The Honda's transmission just offers a bit more versatility when it comes to off-road situation. Now on the XT side, you need to kind of be in the right gear for your personal situation, and if you're not, you just have to use a bit more clutch modulation to keep the engine RPMs up, which just takes a little more advanced skill on the rider's part. Now side note, I do feel the really torquey motorcycles like the DR650 and the DRZ400 really show the versatility of a 5-speed transmission. When you have so much power and so much torque at your disposal, something like my DR650, I could pretty much sit in second gear in almost every single trail, and because the spacing's a bit wide, I never need to shift. Now interesting enough, the XT250's predecessor, the XT225, did have a 6-speed transmission and had similar power. I had this bike as well, and I don't remember having any issues or too much of a difference off-road from riding one to the other. I remember it being quite pleasurable, although I was never able to test these bikes back to back. Also, I have one more issue I'd like to talk about with the XT250, and that's this stupid rear fender. I hate this thing. The fender is cut into two halves. You have a front and you have a rear piece. The rear is mounted to the forks. The problem is it's not ideal off-road. I mean, sticks and other things, mud can just get caught up in this thing. But moreover, I had to remove it completely because my knobbies, they would just rub on it. But if you take it off for off-road tires, it kicks shit all over your exhaust and your engine. And obviously being an air-cooled engine, that's not an ideal situation. So I'm considering making a bracket to install the stock rear slightly higher, and hopefully that solves most of my problem. But if Yamaha was going to go with a system like this, I would have liked the adjustability from the factory. Just being able to raise it up, I don't know, an inch or 26 millimeters or so would have made it so much more of a viable option for those who want to take this motorcycle off-road. Even though that's a small gripe, it's something I wanted to talk about. On-road experience. Alright, in this section, let's talk about how these bikes handle on road and how they are through my experiences if you are to ride them primarily on road. If I was to compare the Rally to the XT250, I would have to say that the fuel capacity, the wind protection, the better lighting, the Rally would ultimately win out. But when it comes with the 300L to the XT, there's not a huge difference, especially when we're talking about local roads. Both are a little bit buzzy because they are single-cylinder engines, and both have a hard seat. Also, if you've ridden any motorcycle on road, you know when you first start riding and drive by a big semi-tractor trailer truck, the kind of scary wind that hits you and blows your bike around, yeah, you're going to get that with both of these motorcycles. They're both light enough where they will get thrown around a bit by heavy wind situations. Let's break down service intervals. The Honda 300L has the longest factory recommended service intervals that you will find. Though I think everybody in their right mind is doing them sooner, Honda's just like, wait 8,000 miles between oil changes, it'll be fine. 16,000 miles between valve checks. Crazy stuff. I think most people are just going to do it once a year as recommended, or if they do actually put a couple thousand miles on the bike a year, they should just change it then. Mostly like any other dual sport. But it is something to note that the Honda engineers are comfortable putting these numbers on paper right there in their service manual. It also has a solid oil maintenance cycle of 3,000 miles or 6 months, of course after the first 2 changes. What I found odd is they suggest you do a valve check and adjustment on the same timetable as the oil change. Now that I would definitely stretch out to the 3,000 miles, but man, why so often? I would think that this number would have been at least double. Nevertheless, valves on this bike are an easy job to do once you get comfortable with it, and I highly recommend you do it yourself. Learn more about your bike. Just set one afternoon aside, take your gas tank off, open the valve covers, top dead center. You can watch tons of videos out there. They'll show you how to do this. But if we have to judge both on the maintenance, I would say the Honda is a clear winner. Like I said, no one's going to wait that long, but it just gives you peace of mind, and you'll have no anxiety of, man, should I change my oil now, or can I wait this next trip? Because you'll never be overdue on the next maintenance interval. Now when it comes on long distance travel, which bike is more pleasurable to ride? Well, again, I'd have to give it to the Honda. With a tall 6th gear, the 300L sets at a lower RPM at travel speeds. If your sole purpose is to commute or long distance, I would say maybe neither of these bikes are for you, but it can certainly be done, and you would still have an amazing time doing it. But then again, in these cases, when you're doing long points of travel and you want a smaller bike like this, I would suggest maybe the CB500X or possibly the KTM 390, both of which would be a little better suited for the road and generally at the same price point. Now the 500X being a true winner here in my opinion, because of the dual cylinder engine and the superior wind protection, etc., it's going to make this bike just the best commuter out of all these. But between the two bikes mentioned in this video, if you had to do long distance, I would say the 300L is better. You can pick up a 550 performance ECU mapping and add one tooth to the front sprocket, and it starts to feel much better at speeds. And then when it comes to distance, the Acerbis aftermarket tank adds 3.7 gallons, which is going to give you something crazy like over a 250 mile range. Now things I dislike. Before we talk about all the awesome bonuses of these two bikes, let's first talk about a couple negatives because they should be put out on the table for everybody that's looking to buy. The Honda's main thing is availability. I do see people in the Facebook groups getting a new one like every day or every other day, but there still is a big shortage. And this is mainly a shame because some dealerships are really taking advantage of the shortage for huge markups on price. This is something I hate. I remember when you used to be able to go and negotiate for a price because the bike is sitting on the lot and they might have a couple. Now it's like you buy the price we put on here or the next guy in line will. Now also the dislikes, we can talk about the suspension again. I did mention that suspension is bad on both of these bikes as far as heavy off-road, but for me it's never really been a drawback because I weigh 240 pounds and no matter which bike I buy for aggressive riding, I'm going to have to do the suspension. Now back to the XT, as far as that split fender design I talked about in the off-road section, there's no clear way or aftermarket part that's going to remedy this problem without you customizing something yourself. I'm running a simple Kenda Trackmaster 2 in the same size as stock, and I ran into problems immediately. Also, let's bring up the display. On the display, the Honda is just a clear winner almost all the way across the board when it comes to this price point. When you have a tachometer, a fuel gauge, a gear indicator, it's just really nice. Now the XT does have everything you need, but then again, you have to remember that the XT's price point is at the same as the Honda, and I would just like to see a little bit of innovation when it comes the way of information on your panel. But let's talk about what the XT does right. Well, number one, it can be bought used. So not only does it have more availability, you can also get a great price. I paid $3,000 for mine, and there's a couple other in the area that are also $3,000 around that price point. And as I said, if you get a 2013 model or newer, you don't have to mess with jets. You can get a quick, easy, inexpensive EJK. I paid $250 for this one, and you can adjust the fuel range in any part of the RPMs, which is really nice. Being able to just pop the seat off and press a couple buttons to add or remove more fuel depending on what exhaust you run, your altitude, at only $250 is a huge bonus. And lastly, the short seat height. As I mentioned, it's kind of best in class. If you consider the TW200 a dual sport, I consider it kind of a farm bike. I did a full review on that bike. Well, it's a tiny bit lower, but the XT is definitely, as far as true dual sport trim, the lowest seat height in its offering. So that's one big reason why this bike has a bit of popularity. Next, when we go over to the Honda with the Honda winds out on, you get so much more bike for the price. The design is more refined, the updated dash and the liquid cooling, it just all adds up to being a more modern motorcycle. And also, we have to mention the aftermarket presence here. When it comes to the XT250, there is some aftermarket parts, but the bike's been out for a while, and as far as innovation, it seems to be stagnated. Now, as far as the 300L, it's only been out for a couple years, and you can literally replace anything to your liking. You're buying a platform that you can completely customize from top to bottom any which way you want. Now yes, a lot of people want to buy a bike and not have to change anything, but let's face it, a bike is just a platform and every single person is built differently. Shorter legs, longer arms, etc. This bike can be completely modified. And that's a huge bonus in my opinion, especially somebody that just likes to go on the weekend and just tinker around and do mods to your bikes as part of the hobby itself. But since we're talking about mods, let's talk about the mods that I think that you could do to either of these motorcycles to make them better for your overall personal experience. As promised, I wanted to add this section in. Now with both bikes, I definitely recommend aftermarket bars. They're more durable, they're a bit lighter, and you can really customize the sweep of where you like your hand positioning based on the type of riding you do. The XT250, this is definitely more something you want to look into because if you have any height at all, sitting on this bike, you'll feel a little bit cramped. I recommend a high bend and some bar risers like I've I've done, and allows you to stand up a little better without leaning so far forward, so you can properly get your balance where it needs to be. I also mentioned the EJK for the XT250, or you go with the ECU, the 550 performance one, for the 300L. As far as exhaust, I definitely like an exhaust note. For the XT250, I went with the Delcovic. It's beautiful. It was around $200 American, and it was shipped to my door in just a couple days. When it comes to the 300L, the great option I feel is the Black Widow exhaust. There's a million different trims. They come in starting around $200 for the slip-on, and overall I think it sounds pretty good. And this compared to my Rally having the Black Widow and my 300L having the Yoshimura. The Yoshimura is a good exhaust, but it's 3 times the price. And most of the time the reason why you're doing exhaust because you want a little more of an aggressive tone, you want it to be a lot lighter than stock, and you want to meet the criteria of your ECU upgrade so you can get the full amount of performance out of the bike, and the Black Widow checks all these boxes for the third of the price. Next, when it comes to tires, that's basically personal preference. I have tons of videos on the channel reviewing tires, and both of which have a good tire size. Now I feel like in gearing, the Honda is more versatile here because having a 6-speed transmission, you can kind of play with the gearing a bit more. For example, when I did a lot of single trail with my 300L or mountainous terrains where I need low end torque to climb, I would put on a 49 tooth aluminum rear sprocket, and this thing just tractored through everything. First gear would go somewhere around 0 to 12 miles per hour, but second gear would hit me from 5 miles per hour up to 30 to 35, which made this thing just climb everything, and I always had the right amount of torque for any given situation. Now my Rally, I run an aluminum 45 with a slightly bigger rear tire, which is only about, I don't know, 4 to 6% lower rear wheel torque than stock, but as I said, if you're doing more road travel, you can adjust the front sprocket as well by adding 1 tooth there. Sprocket and gearing can get a little bit confusing. I did a whole video breaking down gear ratios and everything else, and if you want to learn more about that, check out that video. And then lastly, we talked about suspension. Now, it's a weird thing to say that I feel like the 300L needs suspension more than the XT, and the main reason is because of the riders that are going to be on it. The 300L is a big bike, and when you do the suspension, it's a quite bigger bike. It puts you up somewhere around a 36-37 inch seat height if you do a full aftermarket suspension, whereas I feel like the riders that are riding the XT are usually smaller people, and they might not need the suspension as much as, let's say, me when I ride either of these motorcycles. So if you are a smaller person, let's say 160, 180 pounds, you might be able to get away with the XT250 with never doing suspension. But if you're a taller, bigger person and you're riding the 300L, it's more important, and I highly recommend Cogent Dynamics. That's who I used. They're great. I have a whole video dedicated to them and how they do their suspension process, and honestly I couldn't see it going better any other way because they asked me every single detail and then custom modified my shock and sent it right out to me, and then I was able to just bolt it in. And when it comes to the front forks of the 300L, the easiest way to go is just to buy a new spring, and you can buy a Racetech spring for around $100. Although Cogent Dynamics will also do your front forks and valving and everything. They're a full service center. But as far as suspension, I think the rear shock on the 300L is probably the most important when we're talking about both of these bikes. And overall, I feel very lucky to be able to test and have both of these motorcycles, and so that I can bring you guys a side-by-side comparison of the two. As I said, more content to come on these two motorcycles, as well as the DR650, as well as my KDX200, and other various venture bike and dual sport comparisons and reviews. I hope you guys liked the video, and if you watched this long, let me know in the comments below so I can give you one of those hearts. And you guys are truly awesome. Stay safe out there. Enjoy your hobby. Riding is an amazing thing, and people that don't do it just don't get it. So I'll catch you in the next one. My name is Andrew, and this is Motorcycles Off-Road. Thanks for watching, guys.
Hey, what about me?
Oh, come on, it's gotta be better than that.
What do you mean?
Give me like 3 cut edits.
Hey, what about me?
Is that what a big goofy TW2 200 is?
I don't know. It's a bike.
So think about Thomas the Train Engine, that show, and what a big goofy train engine would sound like.
How would I? I'm not a big goofy guy. Hey, what about me? I like.
No, that's too fast for sure.
Okay.
Like, hey, what about me?
Hey, what about me? I don't know. What you want?
Did you embody a TW200 when you did that voice?
I guess.
You rode the TW200. So
I don't think it sounds
you know
like
what
that.
it would sound like.
I don't know.
All right, one more take. Go ahead.
Okay. Hey, what about me?
All right, that way.